Good evening, I'm Brian Battle.
And I'm Jeff Church.
We're here to talk about the financial climate. But before we do that, just 30 seconds to share a quick board perspective and a thank you. When the board was planning this, part of what we wanted to do was share our board perspective, which is kind of, as parents and neighbors in the district, we developed kind of a unique perspective because we deal with some of the difficult issues the district has to, face each and every year. But at the same time, we see all the wonderful achievements that our students and our staff have. And we wanted to share that perspective with the community and our neighbors, and hopefully you'll see that tonight. I think that this board feels that this district is a very good district. We're in very good shape, but we do have some challenges that will, affect our schools and decisions that we as a community will need to make, maybe not this year, but in the years to come. So we wanted to frame some of kind of the current status as well as some of the future challenges. So I think that's what you'll hear tonight. So we will start with the financial climate. Oh, I'm sorry, before I also wanted to thank Carrie Zandy and Tom and the rest of his staff for working diligently over these last few weeks, collecting a lot of the data and the slides that you're going to see tonight. And I think on behalf of the board, we would like to thank the entire staff. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Church to get us started on the financial climate.
Okay, we go ahead and flip it there, Brian. This district has been through many, many years of referendum, and I think we all now see the beautiful schools that we have. And sometimes it's good to sit back and reflect on the kind of support that the community has given us over time. If you look back to 1990, you can see when Prairie Campus was built, but all of the other things on this slide, $155 million worth of bricks and mortar were put up in the last 12 or 13 years. And there were a lot of effort from a lot of community members, a lot of staff, a lot of specialists to help us both plan, find the funding and plan for the funding and put these buildings up. You can see that all of our buildings have been touched in some way, whether it's totally rebuilt or remodeled. And this is the basis for having a healthy school district, having facilities that are well constructed and well suited for the purpose that we're going to be talking about. Additionally, from a financial perspective, the difference between where the district was prior to 2002, prior to the time that the operating tax increase was provided to the district, is night and day. And we'd like to give you some perspective about that as well. I think that when we're talking about the debt, we're going to have more conversations about the debt that the district has to support these buildings. We've been trying to be thoughtful about these kinds of processes, both considering the cost to the community now and also the cost to the community over time as we have to pay interest on that debt as well. So I guess that being said, Brian?
The other comment I wanted to make on this slide is when you look at all of these buildings, in addition to creating a more modern facilities, we've actually increased from the 1990 time, we've actually increased the number of square feet by about 55% in these 20 years. We currently have over like 1.3 million square feet of educational space in this district. We are a relatively large district by the state of Illinois standards. And I just wanted to ask Tom just to comment a little bit from the educational perspective on the importance of facilities.
I think the little story that I'll tell you that rings in my memory. I came right when this high school was finishing its renovation, and it was kind of a difficult period getting through that stage, but there was a change in the building, both in discipline, both in instruction. I think right after that happened. When you have good space, good ventilation, a proper learning environment, it is wonderful for kids, it's wonderful for staff. And right now, really, most of our facilities are in a pretty good place. So I know we appreciate that from the staff level.
Jeff mentioned the debt. Here is our current debt in terms of the principal of debt we have, and you can see all those referendum and those building projects that we started, in around 1998, created, debt getting up to, you know, $135, $140 million at its peak. It's currently about at $100 million of principal that we have outstanding, and you'll see that by the year 2020, that debt should be paid off. We get a lot of questions about the debt in terms of its relative value. In terms of state statute, we're nowhere near the state statute limit. The state statute limit for our district is $500 million. But if you were to compare us with other districts, because of all those projects we tackled in a short period of time, you know, our debt is probably a little bit higher on a per student basis because we did so much over a short period of time. But as we start to pick, you know, in the future years, as that debt starts to go down, we will have some flexibility to consider any future projects, you know, the district will contemplate. The other thing I would mention is so much of that debt was issued before 2000. In the last few years, as interest rates have come down, we've actually done 4 different refinancings of this debt that in total have saved us about $2.7 million. Anything else, Dad?
This slide actually represents the operating fund balance. And, you know, I think it's important that you understand that a fund balance by definition is the money that we have in the bank. And if your fund balance goes up, that reflects the fact that you are running operating surpluses. If the fund balance goes down, you either are spending purposefully to buy something or you are running an operating deficit. As you can see here, going back over time, you can see that the fund balance started at a very low point prior to our referendum in 2002. And the district has added to that fund balance over time by controlling the spending in ways that help to be purposeful to add to that fund balance. You know, fund balances are important for a couple different reasons. One, when we didn't have enough fund balance to cover our cash flow, the district would actually have to borrow money using things that are called tax anticipation warrants or CAWs. And that was basically a way of covering our payroll in between the lumpy payments that we get for the tax payments. You want to have enough money in fund balance and you don't have to spend the money on the interest on those CAWs to finance your cash flow. Additionally, you know, this was just a theory a few years back. We had never had to use it in practice. But a fund balance also gives you some control over the spending that you do in case there are fluctuations in the revenues that you receive. We've actually seen illustrations of that recently when there was an unexpected dip in the consumer price index, which is part of our revenue. Additionally, the fluctuations with the state's funding of our schools due to budget issues with the state has also given us some wild fluctuations in revenues that we've received from the state. By having a fund balance, you don't have to make immediate changes to your program. You can be more purposeful about your planning and be a little bit more purposeful about the effect that changes like that might have on your students and your community. So in essence, luckily for us, the policy of putting money into our fund balance and purposefully having a fund balance policy that targets different levels has actually been very helpful to us here in the recent difficulties.
And if you look at this chart, and you look at the surplus, the red bars, you can see in the last couple of years that they've been shrinking. And that's some of the concern that you'll hear, you know, from us this evening, is if you look at fiscal year 10, which was the year that ended in June of this year, we had an operating surplus that was about $1.3 million on roughly $120 million budget. Yeah, which is very small. Next year, you know, the budget, the following year, the current year we're in, you know, we're going to talk about some of the uncertainty, but we think we're pretty close to break even. I mean, it's going to be very close. It's probably not going to be a big number either way. But we did make a strategic decision with our fund balance. You'll see the kind of red bars at the bottom, which kind of show a bit of a deficit. Part of what we did with our fund balance is we spent about $3 million of it to help fund the ELC project. The ELC project was funded with some bonds, as well as some of the federal ARROW money that we got. And we took about $3 million over fiscal years 10 and 11 out of our fund balance to help that high priority project. This next chart shows some budgetary assumptions. one of the things that I think we as a board would really like to communicate, I think Jeff and I have been on the board now 8 years, really, and I'm going to go back in kind of, 01, 02, 03, when you've got very little money left in the bank, it's very hard to plan. You tend to be very reactionary. One of the things that this has allowed us to do is take a more structured planning approach to our financial planning. And we've got a pretty sophisticated 5-year model. We're going to show you the output of that in a second. But what we do every year is we look at some of the key assumptions, right? And we've listed some of them here. Our revenue is driven by the consumer price index and by new property that's added to the district. Certainly assumptions around state and federal aid, which this year, has been significantly down from last year. Our certified or our teacher salaries, which is based on our contract, classified salaries, and certainly medical expenses. This year we've made a significant change in our medical insurance plan for the teachers and the staff. It saves us as a district, about 10% of our medical insurance costs. It creates a bit of an increase in an out-of-pocket for our employees. And then we've been trying to keep all of our other expenses pretty flat. We go through them, we can take a lot of assumptions, there's a lot more than these. We just put these up to try to illustrate some of the assumptions that we do. And in our finance committee that Jeff is a part of, we will argue pretty vehemently about a lot of these assumptions each spring.
One of the things that's very important with those assumptions is I do have to give credit to our finance department, Gary Frisch and Tom Bierheit, because they're constantly monitoring items that might affect our judgment. Because a lot of these are educated guesses based on what we know right now, and things change as we go along. I mean, back when the inflation numbers changed, it went from 4% projection to a couple months later being practically nil. And so this is something that we spend a lot of time watching on a constant basis. It's not a once a quarter or once every 6 months. This is literally them watching this all the time because it feeds into the projections that we do through our planning tool. And with the school district, the control that we have over our expenditures is usually into next year. So we have to plan quite a bit ahead of time to affect our expenditures. So this is why this is a very, very important part of what we do.